into my sport now, which is strongman.
So before we go farther from that tipping point, let's backtrack just a little bit.
Okay.
So you were talking about you had that epiphany where that one day, do you remember exactly like what happened or what went through your head? Like, did you just succeed and you lifted more than you thought you had lifted? Like, what exactly happened in that epiphany?
I remember that day. It was a back squat. I remember the exact rig I was on, surprisingly, but so crazy how you remember those things. Damon was my coach at the time. He just, I don't remember exactly what his talk was, but he just gave me some kind of, just positive reinforcement or about my abilities and my potential. And I remember it was a 200-pound back squat, which now I look at, I'm like, okay, like,
any day of the week,
right?
Like,
okay, let's rep that.
Right.
But it was a 200-pound back squat, and
just a little closer to the microphone.
And I remember hitting it, and it just kind of, I don't know, it was just like that moment you kind of realize that I was holding myself back because of the fear that I had to be strong,
So it was like a positive thing, like, Nikita, you can do this. You are strong. You can handle this. Yeah.
I mean, it was, it wasn't super, like, it was a little mean, it was
okay.
All right. It was like, it's, getting, whatever. But I think he just kind of, he had been my coach for a while.
So he knew what made you tick.
He knew, he knew, and he knew that I was holding back, and he could see my potential, and he just got, you get fed up with it. You're like, this athlete that I have has so much more potential.
Right.
And out of fear or just not having her head in the right spot, she's not achieving what she can, know? And I mean, without him, I would never be where I am today.
Yeah.
I would never. I would still be that mediocre, I'm here for fitness, I don't want to be strong girl.
What a cool lasting impact he's had on you.
Oh, yeah.
Just from that one moment, too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Was most of the change in mindset after you hit the lift, or was it right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't have probably touched it, if he hadn't guided you, but after you're like, okay, well, let's try it. And then you did it and you're like, whoa, I just did 200 pounds.
Yeah, I think, when you get, sometimes you get kind of pissed off or mad, like, I think it was just, I don't like to fail, and I don't like to disappoint people. I've always been that type of person. If I respect you or look up to you, I don't ever want to disappoint you.
Yeah, you don't want to let them down. And I think
just the way that talk went, or that speech was just really, I didn't want to disappoint him.
Right.
So I think it was just the whole process of the lift and the fear, how I managed and manipulated the fear that I felt, and then just pushing through and not giving up, like not quitting and not just saying this is hard or this doesn't feel great, but pushing through those barriers and then, feeling that success at the end. I mean, it was intoxicating, you know, for sure.
Yeah. And so you got that big win,
right?
And then you started you changed your mindset from that talk you had. Did you, do you think part of the reason that you were able to start handling those heavier weights mentally more after that, do you think that also had to do with changing programs and just being exposed to those weights more frequently? Do you think that had anything to do with it as well?
Yeah,
or not so
I think
much?
it did. I think after that moment, I think I just kind of craved getting stronger.
Mm-hmm.
It was finally like, oh, I broke through. Like I am now refocused on getting and developing strength. Just muscle strength,
Right.
I mean, as a female in any fitness world, you just have so much pressure from society about the way you look, and the things that you do and just what you're supposed to look like and just all of this, I don't know. I call it negativity because I think it is. And I was there. I was that, I didn't want to get big. I didn't want to be quote, quote, manly looking, I didn't. And I was into pageants. I did a ton of pageants in the area. And so, I mean, that's a totally like 180 from what I was used to and being judged on my appearance as a female and being feminine. I mean, it was difficult to transition that, but in a way, I mean, what I was doing and the way that I felt I should look, it was a negative thing for me. It wasn't because it was holding me back from things that made me feel good about myself. With with competing in pageants, I mean, you're judged on the way you look. If you don't win, well, then how do you feel? You know, like, how do you feel about yourself?
Yeah.
You know, oh, well, I don't look right. I mean, that's a horrible thing to think. Yeah. As a female, and I think I had been about 4 years into that, and I had about matured for that that competition. I had to either step it up to the next level in pageants and compete for like Miss Florida, Miss USA, or I had to just retire from that. And it was just time, you know, I just was fed up with it. I'm not a super girly person, but I just enjoyed getting stronger more.
Right.
So just switching that mindset and then craving that ability to build strength and kind of more curious as to what it was going to bring to my life and just the way I felt about me, you know, felt about me as a person, and more of I would say it brought some independence, you know? I mean, I feel like women who feel that they're strong and healthy, a sense of independence comes with that. So I think I just kind of craved that. And then my community that I was surrounded by was supportive.
Do you think, you know, some of that fear that you're talking about earlier in the conversation about you were scared about getting physically hurt, and that's part of the reason why you didn't go heavy. When we were talking about that, in the back of my mind, I was wondering if any of that had to do with any subconscious reservations that you had about being something that society might frown upon from a feminine standpoint. Like you were doing a masculine task,
right.
You know, according to
kind
society.
Kind of out of place.
Yeah, I was kind of curious, do you think that subconsciously, and, you know, hindsight's 20/20, but you think that subconsciously you were kind of thinking, you were taking those thoughts of trying to fit into society's mold, and then consciously you were expressing that as fear of actually getting physically hurt? Does that make sense?
I could see that. I could see how that could have played a role.
It's kind of like
fear.
Justifying it, like, I'm not doing this because I don't want to fit in society's mold. I'm doing this because I just don't want to get hurt.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Subconsciously that definitely could have went through my mind, or I can't say that wouldn't have contributed for sure. I mean, especially coming from a pageant world of being judged by physical appearance, you know, I could see that. Not wanting to admit that, but yes, it being a part of that fear. Yeah,
I find that's a big fear with a lot of, not necessarily experienced athletes, because now you're experienced athletes, so now you don't have any problem doing that. Right. But, you know, with a lot of brand new women who come to seek out CrossFit or any type of lifting sport, that's the big reservation they have, is they don't want to look a certain way.
Right.
And they associate heavy lifting with looking like it's like they're just going to pick up a barbell and add 50 pounds of muscle. You know what I mean? And look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. They're like, I don't want to accidentally look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Right. It's like, trust me, you're not. Like, I'm trying here. Yeah. It's not happening for me. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And then so you have this epiphany, and then you said you switched programs. And now did that program switch happen like pretty much immediately, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was pretty much right after.
Yeah, it did.
Talk about some of the different programs that Militia Fitness offered.
Yeah, so Militia Fitness, they right now currently offer 4 different programs to fit your fitness goal. So if you come in, you join Militia Fitness, first thing they're going to ask you is, what's your goal? What are you here for? Why are you here? Some want to compete, some just want to be healthy, some want to lose weight. Some have aspirations of competing in CrossFit, being powerlifters. They have a ton of bodybuilders now, figure competitors. They're branching into martial arts and stuff, so they've got some MMA, jiu-jitsu, a lot of different athletes, which I think is awesome. And not everyone's going to want to or need the same program. So they have 4 different programs that you can choose from, and there's fitness, sport, power, and iron up, and each one, they're all very similar, so we'll all be doing similar movements, just maybe different intervals or different accessories, different rounds, or just the way that the workout's formatted might be different. And so at the time they only had 2, they only offered 2 of them, so I switched to sport, which was more for a competitive athlete looking to build strength or compete. So I think I did that for maybe just under a year, until they started to develop the other programs, which Power came next, and then Iron Up came. It's fairly new still. Iron Up was the last one that they developed. So once Power opened up, I definitely switched straight into Power, because Power was more for the athlete who didn't necessarily love the cardiovascular training, but still wanted to train that more with strength. So Power had a lot of your keg carries, your farmer's carries, your box jumps, weighted box jumps. It had a lot of, the goal for Power was to build explosiveness and become a powerful athlete.
Right.
Not just gain raw strength, but also be able to lift and move weight quickly.
I see.
So I just felt like that's one of my strengths.
And that's what Strongman tests a lot.
Yeah.
So basically you're saying that, and let me just see if I got this straight. So there was the 4 programs. The one was, what was the first one?
The first one's fitness.
Is that pretty much like generic CrossFit
beginner? Yeah,
programming?
You're a beginner.
So, like intervals and box jumps, kettlebell swings, pull-ups, things like that. Then sport, was that more of like what would be considered like a competitor CrossFit program?
Correct, yeah. More of your ring muscle-ups, bar muscle-ups,
a little bit more
higher
complexity.
Level movements, yeah.
And then you had Power and Iron. And so Power was like this, people who wanted conditioning still, but more on like the short anaerobic, like, strength, less than 2 minutes type time frame.
Absolutely.
Which is perfect for strongman, because almost all events, if I'm not mistaken, we'll go into events later, is like usually less than a minute, right?
Correct.
Yeah, usually. Correct. So it's very anaerobic, but there's still, like, you still have to move. It's not just one lift a lot of times. And then they had Iron, which is that the bodybuilders accessory programming? What does that look like?
But it's more strength building focused. So you'll have a lot of your smaller muscle groups that they'll train: biceps, triceps, rear delts,
single joint movements.
Yeah, but they'll also always have a strength portion, just like the other workouts will.
Right.
And then they'll incorporate some type of WOD or workout. So a 4-rounder of they'll do maybe banded kettlebell swings to get more hip explosion in there. Kettlebell swings and front squats, dumbbell front squats. There's still going to be a workout programmed. It's just going to have a little bit lengthier accessory work.
Yeah.
And hit more of those smaller muscle groups.
I see. From a business standpoint, what did you find the advantages, or at least do you feel the advantages were for that company, Militia Fitness, to do those?
Yeah, I think they're able to provide more of what you need as an athlete to grow or to transition. I mean, I felt like I was kind of stuck in CrossFit. When I first started, I was kind of like, oh, well, this is really all I can do. I didn't feel like I had the ability to train for other things.
Kind of like you're just doing fitness just to do fitness type thing.
Kind of like, like I'm stuck on a hamster wheel. Just kind of like, okay, well, and I'm getting better. I wasn't not improving. I just feel like with the different programs that they offer, they were able to, one, bring in more athletes, different types of athletes for different sports, which was, I think, is great as one of their athletes to be surrounded by a diversity. Being around people who bring new ideas and new strengths, and you can just, I think it's awesome to see other athletes perform and compete and train, even just train with them, martial arts athletes and then bodybuilding athletes. I mean, they all have these just awesome characteristics about them that I feel like I could learn from.
Yep.
So
I totally agree. That's that growth mindset where you're not just like my way or the highway. You're constantly wanting to learn. I think that's so valuable. And because there are certain people, like bodybuilders, one of their best things is they're very symmetric. You know what I mean? Because they're judged on their symmetry. So they're going to spend a lot of time making sure all muscle groups are built up, which is a great way to prevent imbalances in a CrossFit or powerlifter. You know what I mean? Because they do so much single joint work on areas that are lacking. And from the powerlifter or CrossFitter or strong person standpoint, over to the bodybuilders, they have those higher, compound lifts that help build that density for the bodybuilder. And, there's lots of different tie-ins to all the sports. So I think that's a good point. Yeah.
So I think just my development as an athlete grew exponentially when the programs were available. When they added different programs, I have switched between Power and Iron Up. I do switch between those two programs based on where I'm at in my fitness level at the time and what I'm training for. So if I feel that my body is lacking a certain, explosivity, or I feel like I'm